Welcome BTG Moto to another episode. This is the episode where I have borrowed a gigantic scooter to answer the question, is a scooter a motorcycle and is a motorcycle a scooter? Why am I riding a giant scooter? That's a great question and I'll answer it as quickly as I can. I know several people, career motorcyclists, who have ridden this XADV and consequently sold large bikes. One guy sold an Africa Twin, another guy I know sold his Goldwing to buy a 750cc scooter. I mean, that's a big choice, right? That's a lifestyle decision. So I want to know, is it any good? Is this worth selling a motorcycle for? Is this actually a thing of desire and lust? I don't know, but there's only one way to find out, and that's to ride it. On this video, I'm going to ride the bike. I'm going to give you my honest first impressions of riding a gigantic scooter. There's some control things to learn about riding a bike like this. It has no clutch lever. We have our back brake on the left handlebar. There's a lot of stuff to learn, so I'm going to put the camera on from the very first moment I ride it to give you an honest experience of what it's like to ride. So let's go. Okay, welcome to the Honda XADV 750. Now, if you don't know what this bike is, then let me just explain. It's on that NC 700 platform, and this is a 750 parallel twin with a DCT gearbox. So it acts as a twist and go. I don't have a clutch lever. I can change gears manually, I think, by hitting these buttons over here. But most people don't do that. It's a bit of a faff. You just let the auto do its thing. First impressions are pretty weird. It's got a very wide floorboard for a scooter. When I put my feet down on each side, it feels quite big. It feels very odd to have a big 750 twin, because this has got some torque. I think on paper it's 68 Newton meters, which is about par, you know. A Transalp 750 is 75 Newton meters, but that's a completely different engine. Different bore, different stroke, completely different engine. We're going to jump straight onto a dual carriageway and we're going to go up to the Silver Ball, which is a biker's calf. It's got way more poke than the average 500cc super scooter, I'll say that. Oh wow, I didn't get a nod. And that's 80 miles an hour. For my usual European car, that's about 130 k's, and we're just touching the throttle. It will do over 100 miles an hour, like I think it'll do about 180 kilometers per hour. So it's a lot faster than your average scooter. This screen here is not standard. The owner has put that on. It's a Chiggy, and he uses it for Apple CarPlay so he can have his maps and his music. Do you want a quick history of the XADV 750? I think it was launched at EICMA in either 2017 or 2018. That's the International Motorcycle Show. And the whole world was like, oh, that's weird but interesting. Since 2021 the bike's got new electronic, and this is a brand new one. We've got 1,000 miles on it. It's very, very windy today, and I have to say the standard screen is in a funny position for me, but I don't know how to adjust it. It's definitely not an electronically adjustable screen, and it's definitely not an adjust it while you ride it screen, unless I'm totally thick. There is a chance I'm totally thick. I'm going to ask the owner, I'm going to phone the owner and ask him how to change the screen soon. The suspension there, it kind of gave the game away. Even though it looks like a full adventure bike, the actual suspension travel is, as with most scooters, is quite short. It's actually 15 centimeters on the XADV, which is a little bit more than the Forza 750, the road version, but it's still not 20 to 25 centimetres of suspension like a real adventure bike, or 30 centimetres like a real enduro bike. So don't think for a minute that its off-road styling gives it incredible off-road chops. But also I have off-roaded the C90 and that has about 5 centimetres of suspension travel. So also don't write it off for off-roading. I'm sure you can go do tech on this if you want to. That's really interesting. Like a lot of scooters, there's a lot of brake bias to the rear. You've got a lot of grip over the back because it's sat so far back. It's very windy. You can see the trees moving. It's a very windy day. But I have to say the screen is really, the wind is hitting my helmet and making a lot of turbulence noise. I have no idea if the sound's going to come out okay with this level of turbulence. I will need to adjust the screen, I think. So you've got user modes, which are sport mode, standard, rain, gravel, and user. They change everything to do with power delivery and gearbox modes, but they don't change anything to do with the suspension. This is adjustable suspension but with a screwdriver. I've put the screen down because when I had the screen up in the very high position it was making a lot of buffeting around my head, and that combined with the big side wind, I didn't really know what's happening other than the fact that I am absolutely blown away by sound and wind noise on this machine, and I wanted to find out if it's my height plus the standard screen or whether it's just the wind today, and I've come to the conclusion it's the wind. It is very windy. Tried to fly the drone earlier, the drone ended up at nearly 45 degrees and then refused to fly, said it was too strong. So that's like 30 meters a second. It's very windy. There's a storm coming. Anyway, I digress. Here I am in what used to be wonderful Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, but now is just a rat run of traffic on knackered old roads. 20 years ago, the Baldock Road was one of my favourite roads. I used to hit it a couple of times a week when I used to go from Hertfordshire up to Cambridgeshire. But today, average working day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's just absolutely packed, and the surface is terrible. Just as well that, you know, I'm driving this, riding this off-road orientated adventure machine. Oh. My first few minutes of riding this, it felt very alien and very weird, but what's interesting is that within a few minutes I'm kind of getting used to the step through feeling, and I'm not trying to yank the back brake as my clutch anymore, so that's a good improvement. And for me, having the screen down right now is much better than having the screen up. I can definitely see why people replace their motorcycles with one of these, because for your average speed in your average use case, this is more than fast enough. And don't be put off by the 55 horsepower on paper, because on paper this is 55 horsepower, which is like, you know, only a few horsepower above your A1 license, so it doesn't seem like it's going to be very fast at all, but it's the same torque nearly as most of your 600 to 700 cc adventure bikes. So it's actually a little bit quicker than you think, especially with the DCT gearbox. The downside is it is quite heavy. You don't really notice it most of the time. 90% of the time it feels easier and lighter to manage than your standard motorcycle in this size and capacity. But the reality is this is a 236 kilo machine, and this model, the Gen 3, is actually 2 kilos lighter than the Gen 2 because they optimised some of the frame and they shaved a couple of kilos off, did Honda. But it's still 236 kilos. The suspension is adequate, but I definitely would want to fiddle with it. At the moment it feels very crashy. Did you hear the gearbox? I was in cruisy mode there and I wanted to overtake, so I went full throttle, and there's about a half a second delay for it to kick down enough gears to give you some response. And you get like this little delay and then a kick down, which is quite unusual. I think if you want to avoid that, you need to be riding it in the manual mode and using your left fingers here. So let's just try that. Because when I come out of a corner, I'm leaning in and I use the throttle to stand the bike up. And you get a little dip before the gap. Oh my word. This crosswind. I think the XADV is coping with the crosswind really well, but this is ridiculous. This is not your average day to be riding a motorcycle. I'm in standard mode again. It changes back to the standard mode every time. Okay, what have I done wrong? Oh, I'm in manual mode, aren't I? Oof. Wow, it's pretty easy to if you're not used to this kind of bike, it's pretty easy to make some pretty simple user errors. I talked about putting it into manual mode back there. There are a lot of advantages to having this over a normal bike. You've got an incredible under-seat storage compartment. Under the seat is huge. You can put a whole helmet under there. You can definitely put your shopping on there. This bike came from Honda with the adventure pack and the luggage. So this has fully locking, wireless locking luggage, which is cool. If you think that only comes on BMWs, you're wrong. If you've got the key fob on you, you can lock and unlock the top box on this Honda. I've not got the top box on today. Like I mentioned, humongous under-seat storage. If I just turn it on, push the button, and then I can go, yep, and then I can go seat, and look at this. Now the owner has a load of stuff in here, but look, you can fit you can fit a whole helmet in here. There's a tool bag. There's his heated seat, heated clothing. 21 kilos plus 200 kilos of people. And then turn this knob to turn it off again. Overall, a really impressive piece of kit, but not for me. Whew. I'm kind of getting used to this bike. I've also discovered that for my tastes, it needs to be in sport mode the whole time. Because if I'm driving it in normal mode with a normal gearbox response time, it is way too unresponsive for my tastes. As you can see, it's not slow at all. And 55 horsepower might sound like not enough, but it's actually great on this. It's a great peppy little zippy thing. The steering, the handling, the way the body moves is completely different from what you'd expect if you just read the spec sheet. A 15-inch rear wheel, a 17-inch front wheel, And all of that carried a 236 kilo bike. This is a weird scooter, and it's a weird motorcycle. It actually doesn't feel completely like a scooter or completely like a motorbike. It is a weird in-between stage. A hybrid, if you will. Physically, dynamically, it's very easy to steer because you have these tiny little wheels, you have these massive adventure bike bars, which, as the trend is with, you know, most adventure bikes and even mountain bikes, wide bars are big now. Wide bars are the norm. And certainly on this, it feels really good. I might not agree with the typical Honda dashboard and the bazillion buttons. You know, if I had a penny for every time I've hit the horn or changed the functions instead of cancelling the indicators, I'd have about 25 pence by now. I'm sure you get used to that. You can also put the gearbox between automatic and manual over here, but it's really easy to forget that you're in manual mode and just hit the rev limiter. When you accelerate and forget to change up. And changing up and down, by the way, the down button is suspiciously close to the indicator. So when you're not used to the bike, oh my god, I just hit the horn again instead of cancelling the indicator. See what I mean? Anyway, I've just put it into auto now. But like I said, sport mode, that's got the full engine braking. It's got the very quick shifts on the gearbox. And it's more likely to be in the correct gear for when you want to accelerate quickly. When you put the gearbox into a more economical mode, it will change up to 6th gear very quickly and it will stay there. And when you want to accelerate hard, it will pause while it changes down 1, 2, 3, 4 gears. So yeah, for me personally, I don't like that. But you can control it with the software, so that's why it exists. You just have to remember, every time you stop the bike and turn it on again, it will have changed mode back to default. That's a manufacturer choice, that is, because my Aprilia, when I turn off traction control and ABS and start the bike up again, it's still in the same mode it was before. So when if you go to my garage right now, turn on my Aprilia, it'll give you a yellow light for ABS and traction control, because the last time I rode it, it was in off-road mode, and it's still in off-road mode now, and it warns you on the dash when you start it up. That's how I prefer it. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm sure I'm not alone. Anyway, back on point. Let's talk about this bike. The engine is a completely different engine to the Transalp 750. Just in case you thought they're the same, they're not. They're both single overhead cam, and they're both 750s, and they're both parallel twins with a 270-degree crank angle. So they've got that lumpy V-twin feeling, which is nice. But this is a completely different bore and stroke. This is way more stroke than bore, and the Transalp is way more bore than stroke. And you know what that means? If you don't know what that means, I'll tell you. It means this engine is about creating torque, and the Transalp is about creating power. Because of course the Transalp engine is based on the Hornet engine, and the Hornet is a 95 horsepower sports bike motor. This is a 55 horsepower scooter motor. It's very good on fuel economy, especially combined with the DCT gearbox set to eco mode. I know some of the hypermilers on these platform bikes, the Forza and the NC 700X, they're getting crazy miles per gallon out of it. We're talking 70, 80 miles per gallon. I would never get 70, 80 miles per gallon on this. I think I'm averaging, since I refueled, let's have a look, go to the functions. I have averaged 60, oh my god, I've averaged 64 miles to the gallon on this half a gallon. Huh, okay, alright, that's not bad, eh? So it's an engine that's designed not for peak power output, and not for track days. It's an engine that's designed for use on the road and for use by people commuting. And when I say people commuting, this is still a fun machine, and it's a massive seller. Like, my UK audience are going to be like, what a funny bike that is. Meanwhile, my Italian and Spanish audience, they already know all about this bike because this is a huge seller. 70,000 units sold by Honda of this bike. Absolutely incredibly popular in southern Europe. The brakes, by the way, work really well. No problems, no complaints with the brakes. You got to remember that the center of gravity of this heavy beast is very, very low. We're talking, you know, lower than a GS. We're talking lower than a Goldwing nearly. It's very low, so don't worry too much about that 236 kilo headline. Think more about how easy it is to pick it up and off the side stand and move it around in the garage. And in those situations, it's very, very easy. It is still pretty crazy to me, though, that there is a scooter that weighs 1/4 of a ton. This isn't the kind of scooter that you're going to step off the back and pull the front wheel in the air, you know. No, I find it really interesting that I know so many people who have swapped their motorbike for one of these, and that is to me, that is intellectually interesting. What is it about the XADV that is pulling people off their full-size motorcycles onto a 1/4 ton scooter? I'm not equipped to answer that question, for the simple reason that I wouldn't change my Aprilia 660 for one of these. But then I'm not the average use case. I'm not the average customer for one of these. I'm riding this purely because I'm intellectually interested in it. I'm not riding it because I'm about to buy one. I never thought for a second that I'd buy one. I did wonder that if I rode one, would I want to buy it after I'd ridden it? And the answer to that is unfortunately no. Sorry, it's just not my bag, baby. Do you know, I don't talk about this much, but back when I was on the magazines, we used to get long-term test bikes, and I always found it very interesting to have a long-term test bike that I didn't actually want, because I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment. I love motorbikes. I love all kinds of motorbikes. I've had Harleys, Goldwings, off-roaders, on-roaders. I've raced supermoto, raced short circuit, raced road circuits. I like bikes. This as a long-term test bike is a bike that I wouldn't want particularly, but I would definitely use it, and that opens up a lot of honest criticism. Okay, run out of batteries, run out of SD cards, all the usual, but it is the end of the ride. I need to give this bike back in a couple of minutes, so I wanted to just go through my thought processes. Number one, would I swap my adventure bike for an adventure scooter? Let's just answer that question really quickly, because obviously if you've watched the whole video, I'm sure you're aware the answer is going to be no. I wouldn't. No way. Not on earth. Can I understand people that do? Yes, I can. 100%. I do get it. I do get it. It's a cool thing, and if you've got a predisposition to scooters, this is super cool. But it's not for me. Why is it not for me? Well, I find the suspension somewhat compromised compared to a normal motorcycle. The ride quality's not there. The weight kind of takes over, and then the slow speed damping, it gets a little bit wobbly. And it's got tiny wheels, which has its own problems. Like a 21-inch front rolls over stuff, and the ramp angle where the tyre meets the ground is very shallow, and it just rolls over things really easy. When you're onto the 17 and the 15, the 15's the problem. Everything you roll over just feels bigger than it would on a normal motorcycle. That's just a fact, and it's just pure mechanics. I'm sorry. Add it together with the other things like the DCT, which is not my bag, baby, and I'm not there. I'm not there yet. But if you are there, if you have a predisposition to this, if you think this is a cool bike and you want to try it, I guarantee you, if you're half interested in it, by the time you've ridden it, you'll want it. It's a really cool thing, just not for me. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I really appreciate you liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, all that jazz. And I'm sorry if I've broken your heart by dissing the X-ADV, because I know it is one of the best-selling two-wheelers in the world, and it is totally awesome. It's just not my bag. Cool bike, but not for me.